He interrupted her 9 times in under 3 minutes. 9 times. And each time, his voice got louder, more smug, more certain that she would fold like so many before her. But when Jasmine Crockett finally got her 10th sentence out, everything changed. The smirk vanished from Jesse Waters' face. The power shifted. And what unfolded next on live television became one of the most humiliating reversals of power cable news has ever seen. If you want to hear the full truth, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Jesse Waters thought he had her figured out. Just another Democrat. Just another woman he could talk over. She was new to Congress. He was the self-anointed king of Fox News primetime. He had done this dance 100 times. Invite a guest, ask a loaded question, cut them off before they can breathe, then mock them to a laughing audience. It worked before. Every time. But not this time. Jasmine Crockett sat across from him, silent at first. Still. Measured. Not timid, not angry. Just focused. She wore a crisp black blazer and a stare so sharp it could split glass. She had studied him. Every clip. Every smirk. Every tactic. And she had not come to survive this interview. She had come to end his pattern. Congresswoman, why are you pushing this radical voting bill? Why make it easier to cheat? He began, voice laced with sarcasm, already setting the trap. She opened her mouth to respond. Jesse, that is not. But you are eliminating voter ID. That is just a fact. One sentence in. Cut off. She paused. Took a breath. Tried again. The bill actually strengthens election security by. How does getting rid of safeguards help security? Again. Another interruption. The audience watching at home had seen this play before. This was Jesse's domain. But they missed something. A shift in her eyes. She was not frustrated. She was collecting evidence. He kept going. He hit every talking point his producers fed him. Washington control, common sense voter laws, race cards, conspiracy theories. He interrupted her 5, 6, 7 times. But she never raised her voice. Never lost control. She adjusted her posture. Leaned forward once. Then sat back. Every move calculated. Jesse, in Texas alone, 750 polling stations were closed in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, she said firmly. Sounds like you are playing the race card. Again. That was the 9th time. But it was also the last time she would let him have control. When she spoke next, her tone changed. It was the voice of a woman who had argued in courtrooms, not studios. A woman who had been interrupted, dismissed, and underestimated before. A woman who had been preparing for this moment all her life. Jesse, she said slowly, with purpose, you have interrupted me 9 times. Let us talk about what that means. And suddenly, Jesse Waters stopped smiling. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed, smirk fading. The studio lights still burned hot, but something had shifted. He knew it. She knew it. The audience at home knew it too. Crockett was no longer the guest being managed. She was in control now. And Jesse Waters had walked straight into a trap of his own making. You have prevented me from finishing a single thought, she said, her voice calm but cutting. 9 times. That is 9 missed opportunities for your viewers to hear the truth. And yet you claim to care about democracy? He blinked. Just once. Not enough to notice unless you were really watching. But Crockett saw it. That flicker of uncertainty. She had studied courtroom behavior long enough to recognize it. When a witness realizes they have just said too much, revealed too much, lost too much control. Jesse had no idea that his interruptions had just become her strongest argument. In the control room, producers froze. Their star host was getting dismantled live. There was no cutaway, no saved segment, no commercial break. Just a camera pointed at a man who could not respond and a woman who had taken over his show. This is not about me, she continued, turning slightly to face the camera, speaking now to his audience. This is about how power works. You asked why we talk about suppression. You just showed everyone. You did not let me speak, just like state lawmakers do not let people vote. You cut me off, the way voices are cut off at the ballot box. Waters opened his mouth. She held up her hand. A quiet, simple gesture. But powerful. And for the first time, he obeyed. I came here knowing who you were, Jessie. I watched you. Studied you. And I knew you would try to control this conversation. But what you did not know is that I was never here to win an argument. I came here to hold up a mirror. He glanced toward the camera, uncertain whether to jump in or stay silent. Everything he had built his persona on, aggression, dominance, control, was unraveling. Every tactic he had mastered now looked petty and desperate in contrast to her restraint. You interrupted when I mentioned closed polling stations, she said, each word like a gavel. You cut me off when I said federal standards. You called voter suppression a conspiracy. But Jessie, all of that is real. The only thing fake here was your willingness to listen. Waters exhaled, suddenly aware that millions of people were watching him get publicly unmasked. He had turned debates into performance art for years, mocking guests and framing arguments like traps. But Crockett had reversed the script. Now he was the spectacle. This show was your stage, she said, eyes never leaving the camera. But tonight, it became my courtroom. And your behavior became Exhibit A. And then silence. Heavy, uncomfortable, powerful silence. The kind that follows truth too sharp to ignore. Jesse Waters tried to recover. He shifted in his chair, forced a laugh, attempted to reclaim his confidence. Congresswoman, I think you are being a little dramatic, he said, leaning into his usual fallback, the dismissive shrug. But it was too late. The balance had shifted. His tricks were no longer working. Crockett did not flinch. She raised her eyebrows slightly, the corners of her mouth lifting in a knowing smile. Dramatic? She repeated, the word hanging in the air. Jesse, I am a civil rights attorney who became a member of Congress to fight for voting rights. You are a television host who interrupts people for a living. Tell me, who is really being dramatic here? It was not a jab. It was a scalpel. Clean. Precise. Devastating. He laughed again, but this time it was thinner, more forced. His eyes darted off camera, likely searching for cues from his producers. None came. The room felt colder now, like the air had been pulled out. No backup, no recovery line. Just silence, and the weight of his own choices pressing down on him. Crockett leaned forward, not with aggression, but clarity. You brought me here to talk about voting rights. I was ready to explain the details, the reasons, the statistics. But instead, you turned this into a performance. You made it about power, not policy. And now you are upset that I refused to play my role. She was not yelling. She did not need to. Every sentence was steady, and each word carried more force than any volume could. You interrupted me 9 times, she repeated softly. Not because you were curious. Not because you disagreed. But because you did not want your audience to hear what I had to say. That is suppression. That is exactly the kind of tactic we are fighting in states across this country. Waters shifted again, visibly uncomfortable. The camera caught it all, his clenched jaw, his tightened shoulders, his fading posture. This was not how things were supposed to go. He was supposed to be in control. Instead, he had become the example. The metaphor. The message. And Crockett was just getting started. You talk about election integrity, but you will not even let an elected official finish one thought, she said. You ask why people talk about systemic silencing? You just gave them the answer. The studio was silent again. It was a silence thicker than before. It carried weight. History. Truth. Then, in one final move that made even the control room go still, she turned fully toward the camera and said, This is not about left or right. This is about right and wrong. If you can hear my voice, ask yourself, why do people like Jesse invite us to speak, if they never want to hear what we say? Jesse Waters had no answer. Because there was no answer. Not one that could survive the truth that had just been spoken. For several long seconds, Jesse Waters sat frozen. His trademark smirk had melted into something unfamiliar, uncertainty. He glanced off to the side again, his eyes silently pleading for direction. None came. His producers, usually so quick with cues and lifelines, were quiet. There was no rescue from what had just happened. Crockett had seized control, and now even silence bowed to her. She adjusted her posture, never rushing. She was pacing herself now, like a trial attorney about to deliver the closing argument. And just like in court, she knew exactly how long to pause to let each truth echo in the minds of those listening. "Jesse," she said again, almost gently this time. "You said you wanted a conversation? But what you really wanted was control. You wanted a stage. A soundbite. But I do not do soundbites. I came here with facts. And I am not leaving until your viewers hear them." He opened his mouth again, likely to steer the conversation into safer waters, but she gave him nothing. Just a direct stare, unwavering. She was done playing defense. "In Texas," she said, voice low and deliberate, "there have been over 700 polling places shut down in Black and Latino communities. That is not theory. That is documented fact. That is real. That is suppression." Waters tried to speak, his body tensed, his hand rose slightly, but she held her ground. "And when you dismiss that as playing the race card, you are not just being disrespectful," she continued. "You are helping silence entire communities. You are telling them their lived reality does not matter, that the barriers they face are imaginary. You are helping the very system you claim to criticize." This time, he did not interrupt. He could not. Because every word she spoke landed with surgical precision. There was no anger in her tone, no venom. Just truth. And that was what made it undeniable. "You have built a career out of control," she added. "Out of interruption. You know exactly when to cut in, exactly how to steer conversations. You have made it your brand. But today, you met someone who knows how to listen, how to wait, and how to strike only when it counts." Behind the glass wall, producers whispered frantically, unsure whether to go to break, cut the feed, or just let it ride. This was no longer an interview, it was a reckoning. Waters sat quieter than he ever had on air. And Crockett, sensing the shift, pressed forward. "I do not need to shout to be heard," she said. "I do not need to belittle others to make my point. And I do not need to control the narrative to prove that I am right. All I need is a microphone, a camera, and a little bit of space." And that was what she had finally taken, space. Not granted, not given. Taken. By now, the atmosphere in the studio had changed completely. It was not just tension, it was transformation. Jesse Waters, so often the aggressor, now looked like a man trying to figure out how he lost control without even realizing it was slipping. The room that usually fed his confidence with applause, nods, and screens full of curated outrage had fallen into an eerie, unmistakable stillness. Crockett's voice had not risen. It had not needed to. She had used the very thing he feared most, not fury, but poise. And every second she held the room, the imbalance of power tilted further in her direction. "You call this a debate," she said, eyes still locked on the camera. "But debates have rules. They have respect. What you did tonight was not a debate. It was a performance. One you have rehearsed 100 times before. But here is the thing, Jesse, real conversations do not follow a script. And I am not here to play a part in yours." He tried to reset, his voice finally breaking through again, weaker than before. "Congresswoman, some people watching might say you are just trying to score points." But Crockett cut in, not out of anger, but precision. "I am trying to protect rights," she replied. "If that scores points with anyone, good. But this is not a game. This is about millions of Americans who are being pushed out of the voting process. Not because they did anything wrong, but because the system was designed to ignore their voices." There it was again, that shift. The courtroom tone. No longer just a congresswoman on cable news. She was a witness to injustice. A prosecutor with evidence. A voice no one could mute now. "You think silencing me here is just television," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "But it mirrors what happens in real communities every single election. People show up. They wait in line. And just before they speak, just before they cast their vote, someone cuts them off. Just like you did to me, over and over again." Waters was visibly shaken now. He knew this moment was not just about him anymore. It was about what he symbolized. The host who interrupted. The gatekeeper who shut the door just as someone was about to walk through it. "And here is the irony," she continued. "You interrupted me to deny that suppression exists. But your interruptions became the very proof that it does." For the first time in his career, Jesse Waters found himself at the center of a conversation he could not control. He had brought her here thinking he could frame the narrative. But she had turned his tactics into evidence. His questions into confessions. His arrogance into an opening for truth. "You wanted a soundbite, Jesse?" she asked softly. "Here it is. This is what suppression looks like. And this is what it sounds like when someone refuses to be silenced." Waters sat completely still now, hands folded, mouth slightly open. It was not defeat in the traditional sense. He was still on his set, still in his chair, but the authority he once carried had evaporated. And everyone watching could feel it. There was no edit button. No spin fast enough. Jasmine Crockett had not just survived his interview. She had flipped the lens and made him the subject of his own undoing. "You see, Jesse," she continued, her tone unwavering, "it is not just that you interrupted me. It is that you never planned to let me speak at all. That was the plan, right? Talk over me, make me look unprepared, force a reaction you could use for a clip. But I did not react. I responded." The distinction mattered. He had baited her. But she had stayed anchored. "Because here's what I know," she said. "When you are fighting for something real, when you are fighting for people who have had their voices dismissed for generations, you learn to stay calm, even when someone tries to drown you out." And then, like a teacher delivering a final lesson, she sat forward slightly and delivered the line that would echo across social media, classrooms, and campaign rallies for years to come. "You cannot claim to defend democracy if you only let one voice speak." Even Waters' most loyal viewers felt the weight of that sentence. The rhythm had changed. This was not cable news anymore. It was something deeper. Something raw. Crockett had brought truth into a space built for distraction, and now it sat there, inescapable. He made one last attempt to recover, but his voice cracked just slightly. I do not think this is fair." She did not even look at him. "You said you wanted answers," she said. "I gave them. You said you wanted a debate. I offered one. What you did not expect was that I would come prepared. That I would not let you turn this into another performance at the expense of truth." And then she did the thing that no one had ever done on his set. She stood up, calmly, confidently, still mid-sentence. "I do not need your permission to speak. I do not need your approval to be heard. The people who elected me sent me here with a voice, and I will use it, with or without your mic." She nodded once toward the camera and stepped off screen. Silence. Jesse Waters did not say a word. Not because he could not, but because anything he said now would only echo the damage that had already been done. He had underestimated her. And she had used every one of his tactics against him, without ever raising her voice. That night, the clip of her final sentence spread like wildfire. Not because she had embarrassed him, but because she had reminded everyone watching of something powerful. Sometimes, the strongest voice in the room is the one that will not let itself be silenced.